Hi there folks, back again for another video. In this one, because it's a new year, I thought it would be fun for us to dive in and talk about what we'd like to see from the Middle-earth strategy battle game as we move in to 2023 and all that awaits for us there. Now, we haven't necessarily heard much from the design studio behind Middle-earth strategy battle game beyond what we got with Battle of Osgiliath. I think a lot of people are kind of going down the route of sort of thinking that we're going to see some expansions to that. So obviously all the different elements that went into making that a set are going to be coming out separately, so you'll be able to get your hands on Faramir and all the different characters and Gothmog and all that kind of good stuff, alongside some perhaps expanded Osgiliath terrain sets for you to play around with as well. We've seen roofs and all sorts of different things in some of the published material that are probably going to be coming out when that set sort of releases as a full pack, rather than just as the basic ruins that we got. I say basic, they're still quite complicated, ruins that we got in the Battle of Osgiliath. But beyond that, we don't really know necessarily what's going to be happening with the game. We know that it's obviously going to be supported, which is great, but what could they be doing in terms of source books? Some hints perhaps lie before us when it comes to the Middle-earth strategy battle game throughout the next year or so, and where do we think development is going to go. Now, I did a video talking about the Last Alliance and where I think we're going to be going with that, but because I talked about that in more detail, that's going to be at the end of the video, and we'll talk about it a little bit there. But if you want to go and learn a bit more about it now, make sure you go and check out that video, which will be linked down in the description below, where we talk about the Last Alliance and the potential for a kind of second age supplement anyway. But yes, recently in an interview with Nerd of the Rings, Rob Alderman sat down to sort of talk about what he would love to see wishlisted in the future for the Middle-earth strategy battle game when it came to sort of supplements and that kind of thing. Obviously, anything that he said is not cast in stone. It does not mean that it is actually happening, but I thought that has lit a spark in my brain, because it would be amazing to see what they did with Khazad-dum and Moria. Now, obviously, back in the day, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you will know that we had these kind of supplements. So we had, for example, Shadow and Flame, which is the one that you see here. This introduced a whole host of different things. Weirdly, some more stuff for the Barrow Downs, which was odd in itself. But we got to look deeper into Moria and what all that was about. So we got some interesting stuff there, talking about the realm of Moria in general and exploring it from essentially back during Durin's day all the way through to Balin's expedition down into the mountain as well. And so we got to look at kind of that failed expedition by Balin and how all of that went, and sort of the finding of Durin's treasures and all that kind of good stuff. And also this kind of expanded what we got in terms of models for everything as well, and profiles and all that kind of good stuff. I still really like the old metal dwarf warriors. Those are still the Khazad Guard from back in the day. Oh my god, we still have them. They're amazing. But yeah, those dwarf warriors were really fun. Obviously those are still the same goblin warriors, but we've got some additional stuff as well being added into the mix, which was always good to have. These were really fun scenarios. And I love that they took the time and the effort to build up these and sort of tell different stories. I was always won over by the map design that they created for the different scenarios that they played out. And all the photography was always really nice. There's also something to be said about this artwork that was done. So all the concept art for the game and the miniatures range as a whole was just phenomenal. And having all that pop out, I think, was really nice to see. And so obviously, you know, we had this, which was a good look at kind of like dwarves and bringing them to the tabletop alongside the goblins and playing out those clashes between Balin and his expedition and the dwarves, and then finally, of course, the Balrog himself. But the thing that was really awesome in my mind, and the thing that I really want to talk about, was the fact that we could see this expanded into something for next year. They've done a lot of what they looked at previously in the Lord of the Rings. They've done Gondor in more detail, as they did back in the past. They've done that kind of the Quest of the Ring Bearer and explored that in more detail through the Journey books and that kind of thing, and that new sort of condensed book. We then had the War in Rohan and all that kind of amazing stuff there, which was really fun to see. The Scouring of the Shire was good. We got the War in the North, which was something that I didn't think a lot of people were going to see hit the tabletop, but obviously it sort of brought in a lot of stuff from The Hobbit, as well as Lord of the Rings, which was obviously nice. But Khazad-dum does feel like one of those books that was looked at in the past that could be an amazing supplement for them to work on, and to not just play around with, but expand the range with new plastic character models and heroes, as well as resins from Forge World, to replace a lot of the stuff, or at least sit alongside a lot of the stuff that we have in Metal and Finecast at the moment. Here's another look at. So this was one of the second book. I think it was the second book that came out for Khazad-dum. I love that they've put those I'm pointing at the screen. I love that they've put those mirrors in, which are kind of like them getting ahead of the game of Amazon with their Rings of Power series. But yeah, so you got there, which was really cool. But yeah, so this was them kind of expanding things. So obviously in the first book, in the Shadow and Flame book, we had a look at Balin's expedition into Moria and that failure. This sort of takes things a step back even further and starts to look at Durin, Mardin, Dane, and all that kind of good stuff. You've got Murin and Dry in there as well, two of my favourite dwarves, which is always nice to see. But yeah, this sort of explored everything from that kind of story back in the day all the way through to the Reclamation and all that kind of good stuff in the Third Age, as well as earlier on as well, which is nice to see. And so yeah, again, having another source book like this, which went into more detail about Khazad-dum and Moria and the Moria Goblins, rather not the Mariah Carey Goblins, the Moria Goblins, and that kind of stuff, I think would be really fun, especially if they start to look deeper into all the dark stuff down in the bottom and the pits of Moria. That could be really cool too. So explore the Dweller in the Dark in a little bit more detail. But yeah, doing something like this and exploring the range in more detail, bringing back some of this classic artwork perhaps, telling new stories with the models that they already have, introducing lots more of their kind of terrain building ideas and painting guides, I think would be really fun as well. I don't think we see necessarily enough of that, but it would be really cool to have that back in the fold. I mean, just look at this old artwork. Oh. And as someone who genuinely loves sort of exploring the kind of dwarven culture and history within Middle-earth, having something like this would be like an instant buy for me. And I think a lot of people would be very, very happy to see something like this, because people raved about these books back in the day, well, at least within my circle of friends anyway. And so having something like this to play around with, I think would be really cool too. But yeah, doing even if it followed something very similar to this, and just looked at kind of the sort of exploration of that sort of Durin's period with the Balrog, and then following on from that, that kind of Balin's expedition, I think it would be really nice. I'd love to see new miniatures for Balin, and Balin in particular, but maybe if he was done less like his interpretation of him from the Lord of the Rings version of the miniatures as we saw here, but instead taking the look of Balin from The Hobbit. That's what I'm trying to say, from The Hobbit. So not this model, but taking the look of Balin from The Hobbit and then using that as a way to, a keystone almost, to create the new version of him in plastic to then go up against the goblins in this new stuff. I think that would be really fun to see. But yeah, I just think exploring Khazad-dum and doing stuff about that would be really, really fun. And there's plenty of stories to be told there as well, and plenty of opportunities to do new terrain kits. You could do a Moria terrain kit, which comes with a whole bunch of kind of modular pillar systems and ruins and that kind of stuff, and bridges. Oh my god, imagine if they did like the Bridge of Khazad-dum as like a big, cool rock terrain kit that kind of stretched out across chasms and that kind of stuff. And you could do all sorts of different walkways and make scenarios where everything was focused on those very tight confines, where people could get knocked off all the time and fall to their deaths and stuff. I think that could be very cool indeed. And I think this is just packed full of ideas that they can sort of draw from. And we know that they've done that. They've looked back at past supplements and gone, that's a cool idea, let's bring that forward, that's a cool idea. let's do that. And so maybe looking at something like this and taking this forward would be a really fun way to go. I mean, here you can see some cool ideas for battles and all that kind of stuff on the tabletop. I mean, that's amazing. Durin's tower is really cool. Baranzadir. So yeah. Yeah, I think Khazad-dum could be a very interesting way for them to go. I'm going to make everybody sick. Blah, 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 blah. Lots of opportunities for them to create new models, lots of interesting ways for them to take the sort of development to the range and build on two factions essentially that haven't seen any love for a very, very long time, and maybe sort of bring them back to the fore. I think would be really fun. There's still a range that isn't necessarily bad to paint. I've been painting a lot of the Dwarven warriors and the characters and stuff, and I still really enjoy working with them. I think they're still brilliant. So there's nothing sort of too bad about them as a collection as a whole, really. But I think refreshing it with some new characters, I think would be really fun to see, to go alongside the plastics that already exist, and give me a new Murin and Dra. That would be cool. I have the originals, so I don't mind if you replace them. But yeah, cool stuff there. Khazad-dum, I think that could be a fun way to go. Maybe we'll see them do that. As I said, you know, the range is really nice. Plenty of it still exists. It tends to go in and out of being sold out, so people still clearly want to pick them up. Do a new pack of plastic Dwarven commanders or something, please, and bring them to the tabletop. That would be really fun. Same for the goblins. Sort of refresh the range, bring it up to date, do some interesting things with them aesthetically, and I think people would be very, very happy to see that as a new source book on the tabletop. So yes, I fully agree with you, Rob Alderman. Definitely do a Khazad-dum source book. That would be amazing. I am totally on board with you there. A couple of other options that I thought would be fun to dive into, mainly because I was looking back through some of the old source books, and these are ones that haven't necessarily been expanded, but I think could be really, really fun to have a look at. So the first of these is the ruins of Arnor and Arnor in general. So Arnor is that kind of fallen kingdom that collapsed under the pressures of Angmar back in the day, as the sort of kingdoms of men were split and sundered. And this would again be a really fun way for you to revamp a miniatures collection that has essentially vanished from the face of the earth. So obviously the Rangers still exist as models, so you're still able to get your hands on those, which is cool, obviously. But a lot of the other characters from this, like Arvindui and Malbeth, they're gone. You just can't get them anymore. A lot of the Arnor Spearmen and all that kind of stuff just don't exist within the world, and it's really hard to get them on eBay and all that kind of stuff as well, which is a real sucky moment for a lot of people who wanted to try and do something a little bit different with Arnor on the tabletop. But I think this would be a great opportunity for them to bring this back and tell again these interesting stories, because just like Khazad-dum, they have the ability to tell stories that aren't necessarily there baked into the films and the movies and stuff, and in essence sort of like the Rings of Power at the moment anyway. But you could explore this and tell some very interesting stories and delve into some background that not a lot of people really know about too much. I don't think it would be as massive a sell as exploring something like Khazad-dum, but I think the opportunity and the chance to refresh a range and bring it back to the tabletop is too much to ignore. You know, you get to introduce things like Arathorn once again, and Aragorn in his younger days. Elladan and Elrahir, we could get a couple of new models. You could expand the Grey Company if you wanted to go down that route, which I think would be really fun. Hobbits were also a massive thing in this. A contingent of Hobbit archers were sent north to Arnor to help the king in his battles, and they never came back. And so sort of exploring how they fit into the sort of equation could be really fun as well. But yeah, this obviously then allows you to explore the Angmar range, which I think is a wonderful range in of itself anyway. Full of character and interesting monsters and creatures, as well as going down the route of just having standard orcs and stuff in there as well. And so I think you could do a lot of good fun with that, and have some fun maybe reinventing things like the Barrow White models, although I don't think they necessarily need to be changed, because I think they're kind of nice. Doing a slightly more... I mean, we already have the Witch King, I suppose, so you don't necessarily have to do him. But looking at things like Budhur and all that kind of stuff, and Gulavar, the Terror of Arnor, and maybe doing some different versions of them could be quite fun to do as well. But yeah, some really interesting things there that I think you could have fun with. When it came to building up Arnor in general, and just looking back through these old books just sparks interesting things for me. I just love the idea of looking at some of this old artwork and the concepts that they did in the maps, and building up really cool armies based around these. I think would just be phenomenally good fun. But yeah, really interesting stuff there for you to have a think about and consider, especially when it comes to telling very different stories from what you would necessarily think of when it comes to Lord of the Rings. As I say, not necessarily the biggest seller compared to Khazad-dum, but it will potentially give you the option to do a lot more stuff with Arnor, with the Shire, with some of the creature miniatures from Angmar and all that kind of good stuff as well at the same time. So yeah, I mean, look at that. That's so cool. Oh my god. Doing a monster force as well, made up of wargs and spirits and trolls. Blows my mind. Absolutely love it. Would really love to see them do some stuff on Angmar and Arnor in general and telling those stories. So there we go. Definitely, if you can source these on the internet, I would highly recommend going and have a look at them, or finding them on eBay and getting them there. But they do exist out there. I'm not going to tell you where, obviously, but you can find these and have a look at them for yourself and get some inspiration potentially for armies in the future, which would be really fun to see. Hopefully, we see them do something like this in the future. Potentially after what they do with Khazad-dum, because I kind of like the dwarves, so maybe do them first. But this gives you some cool ideas for where they might go when it comes to Arnor. Now, last but not least, at least for our sort of main talking points, we'll have a chat about the Shadow in the East and the Easterlings and Khand and Far Harad and all that kind of good stuff. So they've obviously brought out all of the new Gondorian Osgiliath terrain and all that kind of good stuff, and we have new characters for Faramir and all that kind of lovely bits and bobs, and so an opportunity for them to step into doing things like Khand and the Easterlings, I think would be a very interesting next step for them. Now obviously we saw the Easterlings got on a little bit of an update with the Dragon Emperor on the throne and all that kind of good stuff as well, and that was obviously nice to see. But potentially we could then have them exploring this as a sort of like a side to what's happening in Osgiliath and the fighting there, because a lot of the stuff that happens in Osgiliath with the fighting and the taking of the city and all that kind of thing in the films, and then sort of tangentially in the books as well, is that you could sort of introduce these warriors into the mix to kind of build on those experiences that we don't necessarily see as part of the movie. You know, you've got Faramir ambushing people out on the plains and taking down mummoks and all that kind of good stuff. You've got the introduction of Camel the Eastling and Sirion, if you want to go back into sort of like the lore of everything and explore that too. You could do more stuff with Khand. I don't think it would necessarily be as sort of sought after, I guess, as the Easterling stuff, but I think there's a really good opportunity to maybe play around with new characters for the Easterlings in plastic, as well as what we got from Forge World in their resin as well. But yeah, I think it would be a nice way to kind of add on to what's already happening with that kind of Battle of Osgiliath, moving into the Return of the King, fighting in and around Gondor and stuff. The only issue, I suppose, is that it sort of marries up a little bit too close potentially with what they've done already for War in Gondor and sort of like the battles of Pelennor Fields and that kind of good stuff, and so maybe that would be sort of overlapping a little bit in many ways. But there is obviously the opportunity to build on the Easterlings and build on them as an army in more detail and play around with Khand and all that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, some interesting stuff there for you to think about when it comes to what they might do in terms of source books. But yeah, I think if we're going to be seeing anything, it will probably be something like Khazad-dum or and that kind of exploration of Durin through to Balin. I think that would be where they go, because a lot of people would really like to see that, I think, and it's been done before at least twice anyway. So having that on the tabletop would be really fun. Having a look at Arnor would then possibly be my second option, at least from my perspective, because I think that would be really cool to see. Bring that range back, do plastic models for Arnor, and the characters, building on what we've already got in terms of the ranges and that kind of good stuff that already exists out there. Bring together some fun new Hobbit packs, potentially as Forge World kits that you could sort of bodge onto the side of them alongside what already exists in metal would be really cool. Shadowing these could be fun, not necessarily up there as one of my sort of big options. The other thing that would obviously be really good to see, and I talked about it in that previous video, which will be linked down below, is looking at them doing a source book for the Last Alliance. Anárion is mentioned as a profile in the Armies of the Lord of the Rings, and yet doesn't have a model. Doesn't have anything. So it's almost as if he was planned, but he never came out. I would really like to see that come to the tabletop, which would make a lot of sense because obviously we have the Rings of Power, which is based around the Second Age, and it would be a great way for them to latch on to different things. Now, in addition to that, they have obviously been sort of joining forces with Amazon and Henry Cavill for Warhammer 40,000, so if that working relationship expands, maybe that gives them a little bit of license to do some stuff for the Second Age without stepping on too many toes. And obviously it would be really fun to see this range refreshed. Maybe we get some new plastics and all that kind of good stuff for the Last Alliance. I mean, they did an Elven Banner Bearer, and they brought us out Elrond in his Last Alliance armour. What are you doing, Games Workshop? Bring us the Last Alliance supplement now, please. I'd really like it. So yes, I think in general we are most likely probably going to be seeing something to do with Khazad-dum in the future. This is no cast iron guarantee. Nothing is set in stone. Rob Alderman did not let anything slip. I don't want to get anyone in trouble, and I don't want to get in trouble either. It's not a definite thing, but I think that is a wish list for the guys in charge of pretty much what's happening with Middle-earth. I'd love to see that hit the tabletop as well. I think that would be brilliant. The other big possibility is obviously the Last Alliance, but beyond that, it would obviously be really nice to see them look at something like Arnor. I think that would be my big third pick, finally, with the sort of Easterlings and Canned finishing things off on the other end of stuff. So yes, what do you think we're going to be seeing from Middle-earth strategy battle game throughout the year 2023? Will we be exploring Khazad-dum and Moria? Will we be looking at the Last Alliance? Will it simply be an expansion of what we already have for Osgiliath and building on that in a little bit more detail? Will we potentially step into the realms of Arnor and Angmar in the north of Middle-earth? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please drop them down below. As always, it is fantastic learning what you guys think about the hobby, and I just love talking about Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth. So why would I not make a video like this, I suppose? But yes, boom, fantastic. Make sure to get your comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I'm being the proper YouTuber by telling you to do all of this. The growth in the channel over 2022 has been really fun to see, and it's really nice that I've got to the stage where I can kind of get a little bit of extra moolah in and things from advertising and that kind of stuff. Hopefully it's not been too invasive, so that I can sort of put some money back into buying more models for Middle-earth and sort of doing more stuff for you. I'll have some hobby updates when we move into the new year, as well as some promise videos as well. And yeah, it's just great talking with you folks and learning what makes you tick and what you enjoy. There is also that Ko-fi link down below if you're interested in giving me a little donation here and there to help with teas and coffees and all that kind of good stuff when I head out to go and buy my models. But other than that, you don't have to do it. Just liking, sharing, subscribing, do all that good stuff. Sharing with your friends is the main thing that keeps me happy. So there we go. I'm going to move on, start thinking about another video. Thank you once again to everybody who's been part of the channel for the last year or so. It's been really good fun, and I hope to continue this success into 2023. Tell me what you'd like to see from Middle-earth SBG. New supplements must be coming. Yeah, we'll see.